Hey, Slider Crusaders, America's the greatest country in the world. Welcome to our special America's Woke Armed Forces. We have a lot of problems in our military right now. We need to address them. First, 71% of people aged 17 to 24 are not even eligible to join the military. They're obese, substance abuse, mental health issues. Think about that. So there's 34 million Americans. This was as of 4 years ago. So it's surely even worse. Of 34 million Americans in that age group, 24 million can't even join the military if they wanted to. And how many of those 10 million are even eligible don't want to? Not good. Second terrible fact about our military. In boot camp, so many recruits keep breaking their bones. Let me quote this. This is from military.com. This is the person in charge of it's called the Combat Feeding Program. And this person says, I guess what the service had noticed that over the past 10 or 12 years is that due to the nature of the recruits, they were getting kind of more sedentary individuals as opposed to what they've experienced in the past. So these kids were coming in and going through boot camp and they'd get these stress fractures and break their bones. Because these recruits just grew up playing video games, sitting around doing nothing, not living a healthy life. They weren't jumping off rocks and playing on playgrounds. So they joined the military, and it's the first time they've ever done anything physical in their life, and their brittle little bird bones break carrying a rucksack. Stress fractures. That never happened before. So the military came up with these performance readiness bars with a lot of extra vitamin D and calcium. It's pathetic. That's where we are right now. Even among the 10 million who can join, those who do are so weak. You got to give them calcium bars or else they can't make it through training. This is very concerning. I'll throw in a third. Since 9/11, 7,057 service members have been killed in military operations. 7,000. 30,000 have died by suicide. That says a lot about our culture, more so than the military itself, but it's all connected. We are in a bad place right now with our military. That's my intro to a new report that just came out. It's called The Fighting Culture of the United States Surface Fleet. It's regarding the Navy. It's written by Senators Tom Cotton and also Congressman Jim Banks, Dan Crenshaw, and Mike Gallagher. So Cotton was in the Army. He was a Green Beret. I know Crenshaw... The other guy and Crenshaw were in the, Banks and Crenshaw were in the Navy. I know that Crenshaw was a SEAL. And then the fourth guy was was a Marine. Gallagher was a Marine. So let me quote a little bit of it. The collision and near sinking of two destroyers in the Pacific. The outright surrender without resistance of two Navy boats in the Arabian Gulf to elements of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. And the total loss of the $1 billion light amphibious carrier to a fire while she sat in the pier in San Diego. I live in San Diego. The sky was black for a week because the ship was on fire. So we had these that was the surrender. We had these four bad things happen to our Navy. So they did this survey of sailors saying, what's up? What's going on here? And one of the questions was to these sailors, do you think these four things were part of a broader problem within the Navy? And 94% of these active duty sailors said yes. 94% said yes, there are major problems in our Navy right now. And one of the biggest of them is, we're going to talk about them throughout the special today, of course, but one of the biggest ones is too much woke. Too much woke. Here's one sailor. Sometimes I think we care more about whether we have enough diversity officers than if we'll survive a fight with the Chinese Navy. It's criminal. They think my only value is as a black woman. But you cut our ship open with a missile and we'll all bleed the same color. The report goes on and says all the non-combat curricula just consumes everything. Like literally your inbox, the administration, like no one can make sense of anything. And it wastes time, precious training time. And one of the lines in the report says, it says, Congress and Navy leaders risk sending our men and women into battle less prepared and less focused than their opponents. And the conclusion of the report is very concerning. The conclusion says, unless changes are made, the Navy risks losing the next major conflict. We're not used to that, not on a big war, right? Big scale war, major power war. Losing the next major conflict. The former Secretary of the Navy from 1981 to 1987, his name is John Lehman, he wrote a letter in the San Diego newspaper, lives in San Diego. He said the Navy fleet is half the size it was during the Reagan years, yet the demands are now even greater than before. Deployment time away from families beyond tolerable. Long deployments leave insufficient time for maintenance. Few ships are combat ready. Training has been slashed. Paperwork is pervasive. The most recent audit found that each ship and squadron, you ready for this? Each ship and squadron is required to provide 750 reports annually, most of which are of no value. That's 2 a day, 2 reports a day. Just bureaucratic waste. And even worse than that is the pervasiveness of wokeness throughout the ranks. I mean, you heard, and we're going to play this coming up in the next segment when we talk with one of our generals, of Millie saying, "Oh yeah, we need to learn about white rage." What? No, you need to learn how to win wars. We're in such a weird place with our military. Congress has proposed a bill to add women to the draft. What? Women to the draft? Great call, feminists. Let's rip mothers from their children so they can serve in the military. Woe to the nation that forces her daughters to the front lines. That's how pathetic we are right now. Not good. But listen, we got to identify the problem first, right? And that's what we're going to do in today's special. We'll identify the problem. We'll talk about some solutions, of course. I saw this the other day. Someone posted 2 pictures. One is of the Department of Defense posted this, of 4 women in military uniforms, the first all-female flight crew flying helicopters, looking all tough. The second picture is of these 3 men from the American Ballet Theater prancing in the air. I'm not against women serving certain roles in the military. I'm not against men being in the ballet. But that's a nice little snapshot, unfortunately, into our future if we don't stop going down this woke road. So let's talk about our woke military today, because if our military doesn't stop acting like the U.S. women's soccer team, it's not going to end well for us. True story. Mike Slater, America's woke military. Coming up next. Spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, welcome back to our special America's Woke Armed Forces. This is a huge problem, and Chairman Xi is loving the state of our military right now, and that should be a major cause for alarm. And he loved when the Joint Chiefs of Staff said this the other day. Mark Milley.
And the United States Military Academy is a university, and it is important that we train and we understand, and I want to understand white rage. And I'm white, and I want to understand it. So what is it that caused thousands of people to assault this building and try to overturn the Constitution of the United States of America? What caused that? I want to find that out. And I personally find it offensive that we are accusing the United States military, our general officers, our commissioned, non-commissioned officers, of being, quote, woke or something else because we're studying some theories that are out there.
Amazing. Josh Mandel is here. He's a Marine, 2 tours in Iraq, I believe, and he is the strong front runner right now in the race for U.S. Senate in the great state of Ohio. Josh, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Really good to talk to you. Right before that clip, he said, hey, we just want our soldiers to be open-minded and well-read when it comes to critical race theory. What do you say?
I think it's insane. I think it's weakening the fabric of our war fighters. I agree with you that Xi in China, Putin in Russia, and other thugs around the globe are laughing at us. Listen, when I got to Paris Island in the year 2000, I stepped on those yellow footprints that hundreds of thousands of Marines have stepped on before. And shortly thereafter, the drill instructors say to you, listen, we don't care where you're from. We don't care what color your skin is. We don't care what religion you are. We don't care how much money or little money your mommy and daddy have. You're all equally worthless to us. And what they were really saying was, we just want you to be fantastic, outstanding, hard-charging Marines. Nothing else matters. And I can tell you, 4 years later, when I found myself in a town called Al-Qaim, where the Euphrates River meets the Iraq-Syria border, and our unit, the mission of our unit was to stop the flow of foreign weapons and foreign fighters across that border. I guarantee you, when I was putting my life in the hands of the guy next to me, and he was putting his life in my hands, we didn't care about skin color. It's one of the beautiful things of my experience in the Marine Corps is I don't remember ever talking about race. We just cared for the guys to our left and right. Were they good guys and good Marines? And that's what we want throughout the military, not this insane woke garbage.
And that's why you shave heads and literally wear a uniform to be uniform, to be the same. It's amazing. So let's go down this road. Let's say this critical race theory stuff, mentality, worldview, philosophy, ideology takes root, takes hold in the Marines and all of our branches' worldview. What's the result of that? What happens to our military then?
It weakens our military. And remember, I don't care if someone's a Democrat, Republican, independent, libertarian, vegetarian, whatever they are, they want tough men and women standing on watch, guarding this country, keeping us safe. That's it. And you can ask anyone of any political stripe or background, race, religion here in Ohio or any other state in the nation. When they think of the U.S. military, they want Marines and soldiers and sailors and airmen that are hard, that are tough, that will protect our country and our families. They don't want soft sissies. And at the end of the day, if you inject this woke trash into our military, it's just going to soften the fabric of our military. And it's the opposite of what we want. Not to mention, it totally perverts what Martin Luther King preached. Martin Luther King said that he had a dream. And his dream was one day that his next generations, the next generations of his family, would be judged on the content of their character, not the color of their skin. And all this woke stuff, whether it's in the liberal media, whether it's in the corporate America, or whether it's in the military now, it perverts and flips upside down what Martin Luther King preached. And that's one of the ironies of this, is that all this does is tear people apart, not bring people together.
Yep. Back to the sissy point. I'm sure you saw the juxtaposition of the military recruitment ads from China and Russia on one side, where you have strong men, brutes living in concrete bunkers, getting up and picking up giant guns and tanks and fighting bad guys. And then our military recruitment ads, which is this little girl who was raised by lesbians. And it's so great because she fought for lesbian rights her whole childhood, and now she's fighting with America. What message are we sending? Who are we trying to recruit?
Listen, I think the message that they're sending by running these ads is a message of weakness, and it signals softness and weakness to the Russians, to the Chinese, but also to jihadis. And all this woke stuff, it causes the jihadis in the Middle East, the Chinese Communist Party, and Putin and his thug comrades in Moscow to laugh at us. And at the end of the day, we want young men and women joining the military because they want to be warfighters, not because they want to be part of some social experiment. And, if these folks want to go try some social experiment with racism and transgenderism and all that stuff, my feeling is that has no place whatsoever in the U.S. military. And frankly, I don't think we should have it anywhere in America. We got to get rid of it in the classroom, get rid of it in the business world, and just get rid of all this politically correct trash.
Two articles I read recently. One said that 71% of young people, which is 18 to 24, I think was the age bracket. 71% are ineligible for military duty for variable reasons, right? Criminal record, obese, other mental health issues, whatever. 71% ineligible. The second one was an article, it was in Military Times, about how many recruits are breaking their brittle little bird bones during boot camp because they can't carry anything heavy, because their whole lives they've been playing video games and they haven't been doing anything real. They have little weak bones. So the military is trying to figure out how to make it so people don't break their bones anymore. And one of the things they're coming up with, other than energy bars with calcium in it, is to just make the standards lower, so you don't have to carry that heavy rucksack and you don't have to hike as far and all the rest. Talk about our physical aptitude, our physical strength of our military today and where we're headed.
Sure. Listen, I'd rather have a military with fewer people, but have those people, those young men and women, be hard and tough, than have a larger military personnel-wise with a bunch of softies. And that's just the reality. Listen, I remember like the day I was graduating from boot camp from Parris Island. I remember our drill instructor said to us, listen, the Parris Island you just went through is not nearly the Parris Island I went through. And it's being softened every year by lawyers and politicians. Every time they get, some letter from some constituent that, the drill instructors are being too tough on little Billy or little Timmy, the politicians get involved in it, and it softens boot camp. And I'm sure that happens across the service branches. And what we want is the opposite. I think we want to pull the reins off of the drill instructors. When Marines or soldiers go to combat school, pull the reins off. We should make it tougher and harder and more competitive and more difficult. And the ones who don't make it, they don't make it. And the ones who do make it, they will be hard and they will be ready to stand on that wall.
I have a theory. I want to get your thought on it. Like if a World War III broke out today, who wants it more? Because now I'm getting more like the psychological and the intellectual, I guess, motivations behind what these people are fighting for. So who would want this more, the Chinese or the American? And I guess it depends, right? Because here's my thought process. If the Chinese soldier is fighting because there's a gun to his head and you have to fight or else we're going to send you to the gulags, then they're not going to be super motivated, right? But if they're fighting for the great Chinese empire to rise again after 5,000-year history, et cetera, then they're going to be pretty motivated. And if Americans are like, oh, we're a pretty racist country anyway and we're not worth fighting for, then we're going to lose. But if we're like great patriotic red-blooded Americans, America's awesome, then we could win. Where do you think Chinese people are in their fighting, and where do you think Americans are today when it comes to our motivation to fight and win?
Listen, I still believe that the folks who are advancing critical race theory and wokeness and all this stuff, while loud, I still think they're a small minority. And I think the vast, vast, vast majority of Americans across the political spectrum, across the geographic spectrum, and across the race and religion spectrum are proud Americans. And if they saw that America was under attack, they would volunteer and Roger up within moments. You saw that after September 11th. I think you'd see it right again if there was, God forbid.
That was 20 years ago. That was a long time ago, right?
But if tomorrow, God forbid, there was another September 11th type moment or Pearl Harbor type moment, I think you'd see young men and women across America raise their hand and volunteer. And listen, while a lot of this wokeness is a virus, and it's a virus that's spreading in the schools and in the military, at the end of the day, I still believe more in America and the American people than I do in the prowess of the Chinese Communist Party or, the thugs in Russia. Like I still hold a firm belief in who we are as a people. And listen, you might say, and some of your viewers might say, hey, Josh, that's rose-colored glasses, or you're not seeing the whole picture. But my feeling is, if we're going to go to battle, I'd much rather do it with Americans than with any country on the globe.
I want to end on that positive note, but until when? How long do you think it would have to be for this virus to go on before the military is so weakened when people wouldn't step up? Or is there something you'd look for, like something to happen and you're like, oh, that's a bad sign that maybe we're not ready to ever win a war again as Americans?
Yeah, if I had to guess, I'd say it's probably around 5 years. Like if this stuff continues for another 5 years, because if you think about it, most of the enlistments are, they're around 4 or 5 years to begin with. And so if you go like a whole cycle of that, and they're still injecting into the military some type of critical race theory, wokeness. I mean, listen, here in Ohio at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, which is one of the largest Air Force bases in the world, they've got this trash, this critical race theory garbage. And listen, I was talking the other day with a buddy of mine. We grew up together. He has a white mom and a black dad. And we were talking about the fact that if this critical race theory is being taught to kids who are biracial, it is so confusing and disgusting, the message they're sending those kids. And I heard an example from Columbus, Ohio, where a mom said that one of these kids who was biracial came home and said that he was supposed to love mommy more than daddy because daddy doesn't like him because like daddy had the wrong skin color. That's insane. It's sad also. Listen, my kids are 5, 6, and 8. They don't see race. I'm just teaching them, you treat everyone with dignity and respect as a VIP. And this critical race theory, it's all about taking people who don't see race and forcing them to see race. And it just tears the fabric of our country. And in my mind, while it's vile in the schools and vile in the corporate world, the most dangerous place that exists is the military. And we need policy leaders, business leaders, educational leaders, media leaders like yourself who are willing to stand up and put enormous pressure on these generals to stop pushing CRT in the military.
And like you, Josh Mandel, front runner by far right now for the Senate race in Ohio. Excited for your campaign, Josh. What's the website people can donate?
Website is joshmandel.com, joshmandel.com. If your viewers, if any of them like Mitt Romney or Liz Cheney or John Kasich, I'm definitely not your guy. But for your viewers that are anti-establishment, who want to blow up the system, who like Donald Trump, Jim Jordan, Ted Cruz, I definitely am your guy. And I'm going to Washington to be reinforcements for Rand Paul, Ted Cruz, Jim Jordan, and to carry the Trump America First mantle forward, because it's been great for my state here in Ohio, and I think great for America.
JoshMandel.com. Josh, appreciate you, man. We'll talk again.
Thanks. Take care.
Thank you, brother. Coming up next, we'll talk with a former general about our physical military preparedness. Coming up next, true story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, welcome back to our specials, America's Woke Armed Forces. I want to talk about wokeness, but also our actual hard military assets and capability right now compared to the rest of the world. This is a nice little video that the Chinese military sent out.
我们在解放台湾时，如果日本胆敢武力干预，哪怕出动一兵一卒、一机一舰作战力量，我们不是对等还击，而是对日本全面开战。 首战用核弹，连续用核弹，直到日本第2次宣布无条件投降。
Nice. We'll drop some nuclear bombs on Japan. Fantastic. General Keith Kellogg is here, co-chair for the Center for American Security at the America First Policy Institute. General, how are you, sir?
Mike, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me today.
Really good to talk to you. I can't wait for your insight. First, let's get this out of the way about the woke part of it. I'm sure you saw the Joint Chiefs of Staff the other day. Talk about critical race theory and all the rest. Why has this infiltrated into our military, and to what damage does it do to our military capability?
Yeah, Mike, that's a great question. And look, I've actually talked to very senior leaders in the military, and I've said, you guys are going out of lane. You ought to stick in your lane, which is war fighting, and not get into this stuff like critical race theory or whatever you want to call it going forward. I think how we got here is kind of interesting. I think you almost have to look at it. I think we got here because of 20 years of warfare in both Iraq and Afghanistan. And we tended to forget, we in the U.S. military tended to forget what our primary role was. And that is to deter war. And if we can't deter, then we fight and win our nation's wars. Instead, we got involved in nation building. We got in the political side of the house, and we became much more of a political type force than we should have been. I mean, I'm not the only guy saying this. I mean, Bob Gates actually said that on a recent interview, that he thought that the military's gone way out of lane and they've become very, very political on it. And I think it's a huge mistake. I think Mark Milley made a huge mistake recently when he talked about what he said to the president and where we should go. I actually commented publicly that I said that was very close, if not actually seditious behavior. And I think Mark Milley, as chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, overstepped his bounds and actually should either resign or be removed. And it's a serious issue. And people are now kind of pushing to the right if you're on the Democratic side, because it's, oh, well, he's our chairman of the Joint Chiefs. No, he was wrong. I'm a huge believer in civilian control of the military. I'm a huge believer they need to stay out of politics. And they've gotten themselves entwined with politics, and I think they're making a big mistake. And the only way we're going to force our way out of this is put new leadership in charge.
Do you know Mark Milley?
Yep, I do. I know Mark, and I've known Mark for almost 40 years. I mean, I knew Mark was a major in the invasion of Panama when I was a colonel and a brigade commander. And I've known him since he was in the 10th Mountain Division. I've known him over the years. But right is right and wrong is wrong. And I think he made a mistake by going where he went to. And he's lost a lot of credibility. When you call supporters of the former president of the United States, Donald J. Trump, you call them brown shirts or Nazis, you have lost 70 million people, and you've lost your credibility. And I don't care what anybody says. I'm a big believer in civilian control of the military, like I said a minute ago. But look, when he's talking like that, he forgot who he was. He's the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He only has 3 roles. He's the principal military advisor to the president. He's the principal military advisor to the National Security Council, and he's the principal military advisor to the Secretary of Defense, the civilian appointed authority that's open. If he's talking to the generals, they all report to civilian control. All of the combatant commanders report to the Secretary of Defense, the 4 stars that are out there, like General McKenzie and CENTCOM. All of the military chiefs of service, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, and Space Force, all report to civilian authorities that are approved by the Senate. None of them report to the military. So he went out of lane. And if he was talking to military officers about potentially not allowing this to happen, he's got a constitutional right. He needs to understand the Constitution. His oath of office is to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. Well, he needs to read Article 2 of the Constitution, which clearly lays out who that is, and that's the President of the United States as Commander-in-Chief. So I think he went out of lane. And what happens is when a senior officer says that, it generally drives other officers to think the same way. It's a huge mistake.
Yes. What forces are at play in our culture today and in the military that would pressure the Joint Chiefs to even get out of his lane in the first place and comment on things and say things like that? What forces are going on? I don't know if that could be on him personally or just out there, in DC, that would cause him to do that.
I think what's happened, I really believe this, that the military forgot what its role is to fight and win our nation's wars. And we've gotten involved in nation building. We've gotten involved in and all over the globe. And we need to remember what their job was. And they need to step back and say, they're the behind the scenes guys. That's what the military's role is. They support the civilian infrastructure going forward. There's a really funny story that goes back to President Roosevelt to show what kind of military officers ought to be like. And George C. Marshall, the great military commander, leader of World War II, when FDR said to him, well, General, what do I call you? He thought he was going to say, well, call me George. He said, General. And the point he was trying to make is there has to be this separation between the military and the political. And I think we've tried to merge that too much. And I think, honestly, like I said a little while ago, Mike, is I think the last 20 years have forced us into forced the military into more of a political role than it should be. And they need to get out of that.
20 years is a long time. Now let me push back on that just for a second, because I've heard this where, the U.S. military was one of the first entities in the country to integrate black and white. So there's some social experimentation and pushing social boundaries that the military has done in the past. And this would be no different today. Is it different?
Yeah, it's hugely different. I mean, this is social experimentation does not do well in the United States military, and they shouldn't go there. The fabric of the military is cohesion, and it's trust and confidence in all of the people. You don't look. Years ago when I was in Vietnam, I made a comment to my young troopers. I said, the only color that's important is red, and that's the color of your blood. Nothing else matters. In the middle of the night when you're in a gunfight, you're not asking to the guy to your left, hey, are you black or are you white? Are you a Christian, or are you, what's your religious denomination? Are you Jewish or not? Or where did you come from? If you're from the South or from your Northeast, you didn't care. It's a cohesion of a military unit. And that should be the important factor that goes forward, is how cohesive is a force. If you put any divisiveness inside the military organization, you're asking for failures of going down there, because you're starting to lose trust and confidence. And they talk about this, about the racial join-in. That goes back to the late 40s and the early 50s, back to President Truman, and back when the organizational units started to integrate. In fact, the first integrated unit of the United States Army was the 82nd Airborne Division, when it was the 504th Parachute Infantry, integrated with that time we called a triple nickel, a 555 Parachute Infantry, and they brought them together. And that's a totally different issue. What you're bringing into are a lot of factors that have nothing to do with what was done before. And to have a military as a social experimentation force, it's hugely wrong. Again, I said it a second ago, and I think it's important. It all comes down to the fact that units have to have cohesiveness, fighting together, good order of discipline, and all you're doing is fragmenting that. And if you don't believe it, people are wrong, because people are not going to tell you truly what's happening.
Does the Chinese military have cohesion?
Oh yeah, I really think they do, and that's because they're very close to the state, and their senior commanders, obviously report right to the state, and it's a very, very, I believe, cohesive force. And I think it's a very good force. But I think that video that you showed at the top, I think they've really gone out of lane on that. I wouldn't be too concerned about that. I said, we are still a very, very powerful military. We're a tremendously talented military that's out there. Now, saying that, they are growing by leaps and bounds. They're expanding their Navy. They're expanding their R&D, which they've got going forward. And they can be, in the future, a threat to us. And we have to realize that. That's the reason I said earlier, Mike, that the reason I wanted us to get out of Afghanistan was we were unable to pivot to the Pacific and move to what I consider to be now our greatest and growing enemy, our adversary, I should say, maybe, is China. I'm not worried about Russia. Russia, frankly, when you look at their budget, they're just an emboldened Belgium. They're not as good as they're not that good of a military. I don't think they are. They got a lot of stuff, but I think the Chinese are a big threat.
I only got about 2 minutes, and I hate that because we could talk for hours. But can you help me understand, with some picture, some visual, of how much more ahead we are technologically ahead against the Chinese? Because I have no idea, right? The Chinese could be more technologically advanced than us, or close, or way behind. I don't know. So how should I even think about this?
I think Mike, is a great question. I think they're closing, and they're closing fast. Let me just talk one issue. When you look at hypersonics, they are far ahead of us in hypersonics. In fact, the Russians yesterday fired off a Zircon hypersonic missile that travels at Mach 7. That's almost 2 miles a second. That's incredible. And the Chinese have got batteries of hypersonics, much like the Russians do. We're still in the test phase. So we've lost some of the R&D capability that we had before. Now, the reason why they're not there is we still have a huge advantage in nuclear weapons, and we have a huge advantage in our submarine fleets that are out there, and our talented and trained military in the Air Force as well. But they are gaining ground rapidly, and it's in areas like hypersonics that are important. Why is that important? You cannot close a carrier battle group close to China right now without having anti-ship missiles, hypersonic missiles go after the carriers. You can't close that. You can't get them close to the coastline.
Yeah.
So they're pushing us further and further away, and our allies see that. So we've lost a lot of the R&D edge going forward. Again, based on the last 20 years, we haven't been paying attention to it, and we're trying to catch up rapidly. So I think we can, because of our great technology in the United States and our great leaders that we have here in industry. But yeah, they're moving out hard, they're moving out fast, and we need to be aware of it.
Hypersonic seems like the future, because an atom bomb can only get so big. But if you can get something there quicker and more accurately, then that seems like the next atom bomb, if you will.
Well,
right?
when something travels Mach 7, you really can't defend that against that. You just can't.
Wow, it's a big deal. All right, General Keith Kellogg, let's talk often, sir. America First Policy Institute. Thank you for your service and for your time.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it.
Super grateful. Love. That's amazing insight. All right, coming up next, True Story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slider Crusaders, welcome back to our special America's Woke Armed Forces. Grateful for our next guest, Major General Jeffrey Schlosser, and he's the former commanding general of the 101st Airborne Division. He's got a book called Marathon War, Leadership in Combat in Afghanistan. General, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well, Mike, and thanks for having me on the show.
I'm grateful you're here. It's hard to believe that 9/11 was 20 years ago, so probably maybe you're 5 years old when you kind of remember something from a childhood. So, there's guys who are 25 years old who don't remember 9/11, right? It's a long time. How has the threats to this country changed over the last 20 years? And how has our military capability changed over the last 20 years, better or worse?
Yeah, so 9/11, basically, we shifted our large amount of our entire military structure and our training to address this transnational terrorism threat that was very clear had attacked our country. And, they had started a war against us. Al-Qaeda had started a war against us, basically a decade prior. But we shifted into counterterrorism and we shifted into counterinsurgency, which is, for our listeners and viewers here, I mean, it's not exactly, a high-tech war. It doesn't involve things such as cyber warfare. It doesn't involve very sophisticated military weapons, but it does involve soldiers and Marines, airmen and sailors actually getting involved on the ground with the people. But meanwhile, both Russia and China and other countries, Iran, were going to school on us. They were watching us. And they were taking the high road. They were saying, you know what, we can't go against the sea power of the United States Navy, the air power of the United States Air Force, the land forces that are represented by the Army and the Marine Corps. So we're going to take a different way. And so they went into things like cyber. They went into hypersonics, hypersonic weapons, deeply into other things that are highly classified, basically. But essentially, they did what we would call an indirect approach. They didn't want to confront us, Navy ship to Navy ship. What they wanted to do is to be able to take advantage of what they thought were asymmetric possibilities and fight against us and be able to deter us. Probably more importantly, Sun Tzu basically says that if you can avoid war by essentially through deterrence, you win. And we were busy counterterrorism fighting. And we got behind. And there's no doubt right now we're trying to catch up.
How difficult is it to shift? How difficult was it to shift from whatever we were on September 10th, 2001 to the counterterrorism? And then how difficult / long does it take to shift to whatever the current threat is?
Yeah, well, I think that, very clearly the last administration and their national defense strategy basically very much made that shift as far as priorities towards pure competition against deterring China, deterring Russia, and in a sense also deterring Iran as a regional player. But it lags behind as far as being able to afford those kind of capabilities that equipment brings to the power of the people. I think we're doing a fairly good job of trying to adjust to the cyber warfare realities that are the potential. In the classified realm, all I'll just say is that space represents a battleground, both for our competitors as well as us, that we have really got to embrace. And you saw the Space Force as one of those enabling capabilities that I think is really important for us. The American people are going to have to roll up their sleeves. And we're tired of 20 years of war fighting a counterinsurgency, but we've got to be able to deter these other nations. And that's going to require us paying tax dollars for more modern capabilities.
My last question about the technical stuff is, we just talked to Keith Kellogg, and he said, we talked about Mach 7 and how the Russians the other day launched a missile that goes Mach 7. He said, we're still in the testing grounds for our hypersonic capabilities. So I'm concerned about this. Can we catch up quickly to this? And can you articulate for us, help us understand how big of a threat and what the future looks like for hypersonic weaponry?
Yeah. So for hypersonics, basically what you have is you have a capability at that speed. You basically can't counter it fast enough. Not with our normal capabilities, right? Let me just put a plug in. The leader that's been involved over the last 3 years that was kept in the Army to do this, to help work with the Army, Navy, Air Force. Lieutenant General Neil Thurgood. I've known him for 30 years, and if there's anybody out there that can make this happen quickly, it's him. I think we've made a lot of progress as a nation on hypersonics. We're clearly still behind. Anybody that knows anything will tell you, just as General Kellogg said, we are behind, but we're trying to rapidly catch up. Right now, it is a big deal because it provides, again, we don't want to go to war. We want to be able to deter other nations. And a great deterrence is always to be able to have a better capability than that other nation. We don't in hypersonics.
And is it as simple as, to go back to your first point, that we were, distracted may not be the right word, but we were focused on different type of warfare, so we didn't put the money and the manpower behind the hypersonics? Or has there just been missteps in that direction? We've tried to be focused on hypersonics, but we just haven't done a great job of it. How do you characterize why we're behind?
Yeah, it's not the latter. I mean, it's essentially that we were focused on counterinsurgency and counterterrorism. 9.5% or 95% of what we were spending our effort on, whether it was in training or in building the capability, that means actually getting the equipment to do this, was spent on counterinsurgency and counterterrorism. It's not that we took our eye off the ball. We just had a different ball to pay attention to. And at that time, that's exactly what we were focused on, and I don't want to neglect the idea that counterterrorism is gone. I mean, they get a choice. These terrorists, these transnational terrorists, are going to continue to bother us throughout the world. And we just want to make sure that, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen not on our own ground. And but that's going to still stay there.
Yeah. I want to ask you a couple questions about what we talked about in our monologue, and you can either walk me off the ledge or confirm. But there was a report a couple of years ago, 2017, that 71% of 17 to 24-year-olds are ineligible for military service. So it'd be 24 million out of the 34 million young people. I can't imagine it's gotten much better than that. But is there something from that report I'm missing, or is this a major concern?
Yeah, there's a major concern, and it has been for several years. I mean, in fact, I'm going to point a finger at all of us, right? Myself, others, and stuff like that. I mean, I think, marathon wars have titled that because I've ran 38 marathons, and the discipline it took went into war, right? But I tell you what, as I get older, I have to fight to make sure that I maintain my physical fitness. If you look at America, we are no longer a fit country. If you take a look at the numbers, they're astounding. I just pulled up the recent ones. In America overall, in 2008, we were 26% obese. Now we're 42.4% obese.
Wow.
That translates to these 17 to 24-year-olds who are, those are the folks that are going to be able to occupy positions of great value in the Army, Marine Corps, Navy, and Airmen. But if you can't qualify, if you don't have the physical fitness to get in there, if you don't have the education, to be able to qualify, then you're not going to be part of this. And we have got to, one, be better role models as adults for our children. And then next, after that, is insist that the children actually become young adults that actually can serve their country if called upon. And part of that, a good part of that, is physical fitness. Good part of that is staying in high school, graduating from high school. And the last part of it is stay out of prisons and jails.
What do you make of what the Joint Chiefs said the other day about studying critical race theory and in particular white rage? Is that something our military needs to be focused on?
Our military is best when it's not a social economic experiment. I've been very clear about that as I speak to our citizens and stuff like that. There's no doubt we are strong because we're diverse. We represent America. There's no doubt about it. But I don't think we ought to be talking about things of that nature. It's not our job. Our job is to train for combat and to go and win our nation's wars.
I worry if we do go woke, General, something bad will happen. We'll have some war pop off, and we won't have that fighting spirit. We won't have that desire to win, right? And you add all these things together, maybe a little behind on technology here, focused on a different ball, people ineligible, whatever. And then you add, well, we're not even really that great of a country anyway. I'm worried that when push comes to shove, we're not going to be willing to step up. What do you think of that concern?
Well, what I would just say is that the way I look at it right now, and again, I've been 3 generations in the Army. My dad served there, my son served there, my daughter was an Army civilian. And includes all 3 of those folks went into Afghanistan, by the way, including myself, but my son and my father. I'm a big believer that once you can qualify and you come into our military, you actually become a better citizen. You become more physically fit, but you also become more mentally disciplined and more fit to represent America, whether on a battleground or someplace else, whether it's just working with the people around the world to try to ensure that they have security as well and make our security better. So let me just say that once you can get in the military, I think that that's okay. I don't think that it's important. I do not think it ought to be a huge priority that, we sit and study things like, this racial theory and all that kind of good stuff like that. It all works out once you go through these training. And again, we're a very diverse force. We would be much better, to be quite honest, if we could enlarge in that group of Americans, the 17 to 24 that we could bring into America. Those that we do, I can tell you, the American citizens, that it's a strong force. They get a warrior spirit. Just to talk about females in combat, some of the best females in combat, as far as Apache pilots, Kiowa warrior pilots, and things like that, were actually females. And that's based on my experience in Iraq in combat and 15 months in combat in Afghanistan. Don't worry about your females being tough. So I won't make any jokes about my wife, but she's pretty tough.
I got 1 minute, John. I just want to ask one last question about the report we provided earlier. And this is the former Secretary of the Navy. He talked about how each ship and squadron has to provide 750 reports annually. So this is just a point on bureaucratic bloat in our Navy, weighing us down, wasting our time. Have you found that to be true?
Yeah, absolutely. Gosh, prior to going into combat in Afghanistan, we had to hire headquarters, four-star headquarters, and we had to do all these huge amounts of reports, of which probably about 60% of it had no value for my boss, the four-star, his staff, or my staff in preparing them.
So why? Who tells us to do them?
Yeah, some of these things are just made up by the individual services or that command headquarters right above a unit. If you imagine that a squad in the Army is 9 people and it goes all the way up to these huge armies that are hundreds of thousands, everybody needs a report, right? We've got to get out of that. We've just clearly got to get out of that. And I think, the Navy Secretary and obviously the Chief of Naval Operations, he sent a warning shot across the bow, to use a Navy metaphor. This is it. We've got to stop. We've got to concentrate on what's important, which is training and then actual combat.
Yeah, I'm hopeful we're snapping out of a lot of this stuff, and I'm grateful for you, General, speaking out. Marathon War, Leadership and Combat in Afghanistan. Major General Jeffrey Schlesser. Thank you, sir. Appreciate you.
Thank you for having me on the show, Michael.
Have a fantastic day. We'll do it again. All right, there you go.
Okay.
Hopefully, I don't know, you feel a little hope after this? I think so. First step, identifying the problem. We've done that. Let's do better now. True story. Mike Slater. Spread the word.